Okay, we're back to connective tissue. Now, I have cartilage pulled up, but remember in this chapter, for chapter 4, I only want you to know that cartilage is a connective tissue, and there are 3 types: hyaline, elastic, and fibro. We will discuss that in the bone chapter. I'm going to skip these pictures here because that's bone, that's blood. Again, I'm not muscle type. All I want you to know from this chapter is there are 3 types of muscle, and muscle is a tissue type. The 4 tissue types again are epithelial, connective, nerve, and muscle. And in this chapter, I'm only interested really in epithelial, which we did, and connective tissue, but soft connective tissue, because we'll pick the other up. For nerve, just know it's a tissue type. Just know it's a tissue type. So see, this shortens this chapter significantly. Now we're going to the histologic membranes. Histologic membranes. Now, membrane is a soft surface, soft layer. Membranes don't even have to be in science. They could be in oil and so forth, gas. Now, remember we had this called a cell membrane or plasma membrane. That's a membrane in cytology. A histology membrane is different. So a histology versus a cell. A histology membrane lines or covers. The types of histology membranes that we have, the major types we'll say, are cutaneous, mucous, serous, and synovial. So we're going to talk on that. Cutaneous, mucous, serous, and synovial. The reason we're putting it here is that a membrane is a composite tissue. What a membrane should have is a layer of epithelia on top of a basement membrane or basal lamina and some connective tissue. So, see, this membrane puts it all together for what I did in this chapter. Remember this chapter I did epithelia and soft connective tissue. Epithelia and soft connective tissue. So histologic membrane is composed of epithelia on top of a basement membrane, a basal lamina, and some connective tissue. But that connective tissue will be a soft connective tissue. 4 types of membrane mainly that we'll talk about are cutaneous, mucous, serous, and synovial. Okay, let's start with the first one. The cutaneous membrane, we won't say a whole lot on it because that's the skin. And that, in fact, is the next chapter. The epithelia, the epidermis, you may remember, is a stratified squamous. The dermis is connective tissue. So the cutaneous membrane is composed of the epidermis, which is epithelia, and the dermis, which is connective tissue. Again, we'll be talking about that in the next chapter. All right. A mucous membrane lines body cavities that open to the outside. Let me say that again. A mucous membrane lines body cavities that open to the outside. All right. For example, the mouth, the nose, the anus, the vagina, the urethra is where you urinate out of. A little tube you urinate out of. Now notice, I'm going to come here. Notice I never said anything about it having mucus. All of the areas, the mouth, the nose, anus, vagina, do have mucus. The urethra doesn't have it normally or it would clog it up, but it can produce it quickly. So that's why I left it at lined body, open to the outside, and didn't say they always had to have mucus because of this here. Right? Here's the nasal mucosa, example of a mucous membrane. Okay? What a mucous membrane has is a layer of non-keratinized stratified squamous. What a mucous membrane has is a layer, and I'm going to come right here and put that. What a mucous membrane has, let's say, the epithelia, let's just put it here, is a non-keratinized, as the ED, stratified squamous. Okay, I'm putting it in as we talk. The epithelia is a non-keratinized stratified squamous. Now, When we get into the next chapter, which is skin, we're going to say that the skin is a keratinized stratified squamous. The mucous membrane is a non-keratinized. Keratin is a waterproofer. So you don't want to lose water in this hot Texas heat through your skin except through the sweat glands, because you'd be dehydrated real quick during August, late July. So it's a waterproofer. We'll talk about keratinocytes, cells that have this keratin to waterproof. However, on a mucous membrane, I do want water to come to the top. Why? Because the cells secrete mucin. Remember? Mucin is not mucus. The mucin would go to the top and have to mix with water. So you need water. So you want a non-keratinized stratified squamous. And then the water can leak up and mix with the mucin. Now, why stratified? See, in both cases, a stratified means you're in an area of high abrasion. So when you knock off a few cells, you still got some. In surgery, if we're working on an infected case, we put 2 gloves on called double gloving. If one breaks, hopefully the other will stay intact. So stratified means you're in an area of high abrasion and you want to knock, well, even in these areas, high abrasion, the mouth, you're brushing your teeth, the nose, all of that subject to the outside, looking at the outside of the body. So you still need it stratified because you're rubbing layers off, but you don't want to waterproof because otherwise you couldn't put water with the mucin. Okay? Mucous membranes. Serous membranes, a thin, wet, it almost looks like wax paper. This is a thin, wet membrane. Now, what's it composed of? It has an epithelial layer, a simple squamous epithelium. See, these surround areas inside the body, hollow areas inside the body. They don't open to the outside. So you can afford to have a simple squamous layer. The simple squamous layer, again, we've spoken, is called the mesothelium. Remember, we talked about a mesothelioma. Underneath, you have a basement membrane. And under that, a very thin layer of loose connective. In other words, if I held a serous membrane up, you could see through it, almost like wax paper. Serous means wet. Serous means wet. So this is a thin, wet membrane. Thin, wet membrane. To allow sliding. See, you have it around the heart and you have it around the lungs. The heart beats at 60 to 100 beats per minute. The lungs about 12 to 20 breaths per minute. So see, you can slide one past the other. Even in so we have a pericardium, serous pericardium, serous pleural for lungs. Then we have the peritoneum, because we want inside the peritoneal cavity in the abdominal area, you want the intestines to be able to slide past one another. Okay? So these are serous membranes. The serous membrane has 2 layers. A visceral layer attached to the organ itself. Go back and look in chapter 1, and a parietal layer. And between the serous and between the visceral and parietal is the space where you have some fluid. Serous fluid to allow the slide. So that's a serous membrane. Read on that in your text also. Pleura, serous pericardium, peritoneum. Purpose of serous again, reduce friction. Okay? There we are showing some serous membranes, pericardium and so forth. Pleura, parietal pleura, visceral pleura, peritoneum. All right. So that's what we're looking at there. Now I'm going to end right here because now we're going to go into tissue repair. So I'm going to end that right there.